Hello, good evening, and welcome to another Get to Know the Candidate. My name is Aura Vasquez, and I'm going to be your host for the evening today. I am just so excited to host somebody that is not only a woman, a fellow candidate this time around, but is also a neighbor of mine. So, someone that I know quite well. And I hope you also get to know her really well and ask her questions. As always, it's always better when we continue our conversation online. So please feel free to ask your questions and your comments on the chat so we can bring them to our conversation. And that way, feel the connectedness and the solidarity among ourselves, even in the distance. So, with no further ado, I would like to introduce you all to Hydee Feldstein Soto. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Bienvenida. Hi,
Saludos, mi
welcome.
amiga.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me here. This is really a pleasure. I'm very grateful.
Of
And I'm very
course.
excited to have this conversation.
Me too. I am beyond excited to have you today because I was just sharing with my audience and folks that are just tuning in. Thank you so much for being here. And we are excited to bring to you this conversation about a very important race, which is the city attorney. And we'll get to talk more about that. But I want to start our conversation with an anecdote. And I actually met Hydee on the campaign trail, not hers, but mine, actually, when she was in 2020 or 2019, when she was speaking about some very important issues of affordable housing. So that's how I know her. She is an incredible activist organizer in that space. But for some of you that don't know who she is, let's just start by asking her, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Thank you. Let me start with Soy Borinqueña Orgullosísima. So a shout out there to every Latina, Latino, and Borinqueño in our audience. I was born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And for the first 5 years of my life, I was monolingual Spanish. My parents then decided to send me to a school where the primary language was English, although, of course, we still took Spanish class. And so I've been bilingual since I was 5. I came to the States from Puerto Rico to study. And I went to college and law school back east and kind of decided 7 winters was enough. I left them behind and I came to LA in 1982. So I'm a 40-year resident of LA. This is at this point my home. I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else, including Puerto Rico. I got married and divorced here. I raised my son here, God bless him. Okay. This is a place where I not only found the warm weather I came to seek, but I found really fertile ground on which to plant roots, raise a family, build a career, and thrive. And that's the city that I know and love. That's LA to me.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you so much because also I'm an immigrant. I'm an immigrant for South America. And I know the same as you. I came here just trying to find a new home. And LA offered me not only a beautiful community, but also a beautiful place where there's so much nature and so much ground for us to work together and to make our city amazing, which is something that is really appealing to me. And I think it's to you too.
Mm-hmm.
So you're running for city attorney. And before I ask you about why you're running, because I think, for some of us that have run for office, we know how hard it is. My question is, can you tell us a little bit about what the city attorney does?
Yes.
I know that a lot of members of my, my stream and my community, sometimes they don't know. So if you can educate us about the office of the city attorney in Los Angeles.
I like to start by saying that the city attorney is not the district attorney. Okay, those are 2 completely different roles. So if for the names that folks would recognize, George Gascon is our district attorney. I am not running for that office. That office is really the main criminal prosecution arm in our jurisdiction for all felonies. I'm running for city attorney, and the current city attorney is Mike Fuhrer. And I break down the role of the city attorney into 3 buckets. Bucket number 1 is you're the managing general partner of one of the largest public law firms in the country. And
Mm.
there's 550 lawyers, another 500 employees, and $150 million budget. What I can tell you is that over the last 40 years of practice, I've closed deals that are many times the size of that budget. I've run groups of lawyers and managed them on deals in the firm and in the profession. And I did so really well. And so that piece of the job is something that needs to be done and that I think I'm kind of uniquely qualified to do. The second part of the job is being the general counsel to Los Angeles. That doesn't mean you represent a single individual or a single department. You represent the city as a whole, and you've got an obligation to take best long-term interests of the city at heart. So you draft every contract, you summarize ballot measures, you draft ordinances and resolutions, you represent the city in civil and affirmative litigation, and you administer and prosecute misdemeanors within city limits. That's kind of the being the lawyer part. So you've got the being the manager part, being the lawyer part. And then the third part is kind of unique and really exciting, which is that you're one of only 3 citywide elected officials.
Mhm.
So you have an obligation, I have an obligation to you as my constituent, you know, and people say to me, does that mean you represent me? The answer is no, I don't represent you as a lawyer, but I do represent you as an elected official back to your constituents.
Mhm.
And I really want to focus on how the city attorney's office can do better by the residents and the businesses of our city and really come into the community with a neighborhood law court, come into services, come into the community to help resolve issues and help people do business with and in our city.
Yeah.
That's the city attorney.
And it's such an important piece because I know the city of Los Angeles has tons of contracts, for example, with vendors, with companies, with, that fix our streets, that, do a
And
lot of
how
things.
many of them do you think are awarded on a competitive bid fair basis?
Exactly. I
Not
have
many.
no idea. Tell me.
It depends on the department and it depends on the type of contract, but the competitive bidding procedures of the city charter are honored in the breach more often than not. Don't have the data and the city doesn't publish it, but if I'm the city attorney, I will publish it. Okay. And I think it's far less than 50% of the contracts are actually put out for bid the way they're supposed to be under our city charter.
Wow, that is incredible. And as someone, I serve in the DWP commissioner and we came across so many contracts. And as you know, it's so important to have an attorney office, a city attorney office that can look out for you so that you can make the best decisions for our city. And I mean, we often see these in, not just in the WP, but in other places. You are advised by your staff, you are advised by general managers, and you cannot do what you have to, like what you're advised to do. And I guess the city attorney in that case can be an instrumental body to kind of help you make the best decisions when they come, to you.
The tragedy of the David Wright case, okay, where David Wright, who was the general manager of the DWP, has pled guilty to taking a bribe, and Paul Paradis pled guilty to making a bribe. And I went back to the hearing and I watched that transcript, and David Wright swore to the commission, there's no time for a bidding process. There's no time for a request for proposal. I would love to do a request for proposal. But if you make me do that, this will fall apart. And I urgently need you to approve this contract. I mean, I looked at that and I thought to myself, okay, and here's part of the problem. He wasn't under oath.
Right.
Commission hearings, people come in and say what they want, and it's not under oath. And so we need to have the city attorney's office really implementing the policy and really making sure that the process is fair, transparent, and open to competitive bids from anyone who might do as well or better than the single bid $30 million contract that Wright took a bribe for.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I'm sure and throughout our conversation, we're gonna learn more about your role. And my natural question after this conversation is to ask you, why did you want to run for office? It's such a crazy thing that we get ourselves into. Why you want to run for office?
Because I can help. Because I want to make the city work. Because I mean, there's a push and a pull to the decision, Aura. Here's what I can tell you. I'm a lawyer, and I come to this job as a capstone to the legal career, not as a stepping stone to a political career. I'm 63 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to run for any other office. But I look at what's happened to the city that I came to in 1982. And to me, from my perspective, the only thing that's gotten better is that the brown haze that used to back up into the mountains in August and September is not quite as dense. Okay.
Right.
Everything else has declined and declined precipitously. And I am not willing to do what so many of my friends and former partners have done and vote with my feet
Mm-hmm.
without putting my shoulder to the wheel, trying to be the kind of candidate that I always go to the polls and I say, I want to see someone who can do the work, who's not in it for a livelihood, okay, who's made a living in the private sector, but is coming back to this really as a matter of public service.
Yeah.
To do the job and then go home. And I will do that. I sat down and I studied the office and I figured out specific things that I think I could do. And I wouldn't be running if I didn't think I could really help.
Yeah, and I think it's so important what you're saying, because we see so many people that are coming into office because they want a job, because they want to be a career politicians. And so many of us are so tired of that. We want to see real people that understand our issues, that understand what's like to struggle, that understand also that have empathy, and that understand that for some of us it's break it or make it, and some people that have traditionally haven't been heard and have them in the forefront of the of that work. So important what you're saying about being a public servant and understanding that you are in the business of serving other people and not just your own self-interest.
I will tell you that all of the candidates in my race were invited to attend a forum of the People's Council and Black Lives Matter. I don't remember when, last month. And there was a pledge, which I was not prepared to take, because my views of what is appropriate for the city attorney to do didn't correlate exactly with the pledge that I was asked to take. And I've been resistant to just about every pledge I've been asked to take, for a whole host of different reasons. But I went, okay? And the stage was 3 out of the 7 candidates. And that's abysmal. And then one of the members of the audience asked me why I was there, if I wasn't willing to take the pledge. And my answer was simple. Number one, I was invited, so I assumed I was welcome. Number two, as Dr. Abdullah has said, candidates should run to the people, not from the people, even when you disagree with them. And so I wasn't going to run away. And number three, as a sign of mutual respect, I was there to listen and learn, and also to explain my position. And that's the kind of city attorney I will be. I don't care whether or not you agree with me. And especially as city attorney, it's not really my job to get in the middle of policy issues. It's my job to draft constitutional laws that aren't going to be overturned by the courts. It's my job to draft enforceable laws that my lawyers can enforce, okay, without violating any other principles. And it's my job to always seek fairness, justice, transparency, and accountability, not only for myself and my office, but for the city and all of its officials as a whole. And so that's part of what I'd like to try to put in place.
Yeah, amazing. And I asked this question to to all of the folks that come, the candidates that come to my podcast, my live stream. So all of you that are watching, thank you so much for always supporting me and for watch and for and for sharing around this message. This is not just for me. This is to bring awareness to our community for incredible candidates that are running for office. Elections are just around the corner, friends. Next week, we're going to have ballots at home. If you're in LA, get ready, make a plan for you, your family, your friends, your ex-boyfriends, your future partners, everybody. Make sure that they're all ready to vote in June. But you can start as soon as next week. So
Week after next, May 9th.
May 9th, yeah. Also, wait, are we okay? Yeah. So no, we have 2 weeks. Mother's Day. Okay, excellent. So do you have a platform that you want to move forward? Is that a thing for LA City, attorney candidates? Do you also have a platform? Can you share with us a little bit about what your platform is?
Platform is, to me, slightly different when you're talking about the city attorney, because it's a question of what can the city attorney do? And the city attorney isn't supposed to be making policy and isn't supposed to be out there front running city council, right? But here's what the city attorney can do. Let's just take one issue, which is homelessness. Number one, we are spending $2,000 to $3,000 per square foot. Okay, what you see in the paper is $500,000 and climbing per unit. But when you break it down, it's $2,000 to $3,000 per square foot. For any of the listeners who understand construction, that's outrageous. I mean, the going market rate for construction is $200 to $300 a square foot.
Wow.
So let's do the power of the numbers. For the triple H money at 2,000 to 3,000 per square foot, the city is projecting 7,000 units. That's a drop in the bucket. Cut the cost to 200 to 300. What happens? 7,000 units becomes 70,000 units.
Yeah.
Voila. Milagro, mi amor. All of a sudden, and I'm not suggesting that solves the crisis for the folks that are currently unhoused, because without services, without help, without a leg up, that isn't enough by itself, 4 walls and a roof. But it does solve the immediate problem of shelter. It does take care of, can we bring people indoors if they want to come indoors? And so cutting the cost of that housing by enforcing the competitive bidding procedures of the city charter, by fixing the form of financing so that developers aren't left to try to cobble together 80% of the costs as against the city's funding seed money of 20%, by streamlining the development process so that there's one point of entry. You know, if the fire department and building and safety and planning and housing department all have different issues, guess what? I don't think that should be the business or the resident's problem. You ought to be able to come to one place at the city, have our city family get together and decide what the right answer is to you, and get back to you with one voice. And I'm happy to work within the city to set that up as a single entry portal. I think that would facilitate things and streamline it. So if we can bring down the cost of housing, we can afford to build what we need or adaptively reuse. I mean, I'm not suggesting it all has to be new construction, but we can afford to create the housing we need.
Absolutely. And right now, I just read in the paper yesterday in the LA Times that Angelinos feel that LA is too expensive for them to be here. People are like there's a massive exodus of folks, residents, neighbors that are leaving because they just don't see themselves in here. So this is such an important issue that you're touching. So important affordability, housing affordability. And this is the way also how we're going to combat homelessness and how we're going to prevent people getting in the streets. So absolutely.
The homelessness issue goes a step further. You need to be sure that the city is getting its fair share of mental health and physical health dollars. I mean, people always talk about mental health as a homelessness issue. In fact, there's a lot of folks in wheelchairs. There's a lot of folks who can't walk or have physical disabilities of some kind or another who need medical help and who need medical equipment. And we don't have a health department in the city of LA. Pasadena does, Long Beach does, but we are dependent on the county. And what are we doing? We're fighting with the county. We're in litigation with the county. If it were me, I would find a way to work with the county We are 40% of the population of the county and 70% of the need. You think we
Totally.
might be able to get some of those mental health and physical health dollars?
Absolutely. Wraparound service is so important. It's key. They cannot do it. We cannot do it alone. Like, it's gonna require a whole village, a whole set of services, housing, job placement, so many other services for our unhoused folks, and also prevention. How can we prevent from people ending up on the streets?
Well, and I mean, we've got a step in the rent stabilization ordinance.
Yeah,
But I also think that if you bring down the cost of housing so that you make it more readily available, a lot of that issue will take care of itself. There
yeah,
are some market corrections that may be necessary. I mean, it's one of the things that always comes up in these conversations is some people think there's 110,000 vacant units in LA
yeah.
that are being reserved for foreign investment. I don't know if that's true today or not because we don't have the data, but let's
Right.
get the data. Let's figure it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a really good question for you coming in the chat. I think it's perfect, in fact. So let me see. Let me see if I can bring up the screen better for us. So the question is the candidate a lawyer, which you are? You explained this earlier. What kind of law do you practice? And what will the candidate do about reporting bribe offers to her? I think I want to send that question about bribery in general for other city council members, other city officials. Would she seek to prosecute the companies or persons who presents the illegal bribe, even if it is non-colleague business or even a family member? So here is the question for you.
Let's start with the last part first. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not a hard answer. The erosion of trust in our public institutions is what is ultimately irreparable harm. If we don't stem this concept that our public officials are for sale, and I'm not just talking about a direct bribe to me, okay? I think that money corrodes beyond that. I
Mm-hmm.
think that if what you do is you offer my son a job, okay, in
Mm-hmm.
exchange for something, that's a problem. I
Yeah.
think that if what you do is you make a behested payment to the city attorney's fund in exchange for an official act, and then that money is a slush fund that I can use to further the principles of my office, that's a problem. So yes, and I do think that when what you're talking about is me, it's easy enough for me to say, of course, I would prosecute the person who bribed. When the bribe occurs outside of me personally, but is a city official, and this is going to sound like I'm passing the buck, but I'm not. I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to keep it transparent. That prosecution ought to fall to the district attorney as a felony or to the Department of Justice, to the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because that's how you keep it from an apparent conflict of interest. If the Department of Justice investigates and finds nothing wrong, that's one thing. If I investigate someone who I work with every day and find nothing wrong, there's going to be people who laugh at me and say, that's not accurate. That's not true. Of course, there was something wrong. She's covering up. So my view is you keep it transparent, you keep it accountable, you set up an independent investigation with checks and balances so that people can be brought to account.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm a lawyer. The requirements for being a city attorney are that you have had to have been qualified to practice law in California for at least 5 years. And I've done all kinds of things in my career. I started life as a litigator and bankruptcy lawyer and then migrated to finance. What I became best known for at my two law firms is I was a corporate and finance lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what I did. And in the years since I left my law firms, I've spent a lot of time on land use, zoning, and housing because my
Yeah.
passion has been finding ways to incentivize the creation of affordable housing.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for that. I have another question for you, coming from Kurt. And he's asking if does the LA Attorney Office has power on environmental issues?
Yes, Kurt,
Good question.
we do. And as a matter of fact, let me give you some concrete examples. Number one, there's currently the Wildlife Ordinance that was proposed, I guess, originally 2 years ago and just got passed. I'm going to break my arm patting myself on the back because I was the person that originally looked at that ordinance and said, wait a minute, the way it's drafted, it actually cuts the wildlife corridors in half. Because what it did was it redefined setbacks at not less than 10 feet. And if you look at the hillside ordinance does it as a ratio, which makes it not less than 20 feet. And so as drafted, the original wildlife ordinance was a problem. And I gave that information to the Hillside Federation and to all kinds of groups, particularly in the hillsides. And I just looked at the new ordinance and that issue has been fixed.
Nice.
City attorney enforces or should be enforcing the inspection requirements for oil wells. It should be enforcing the closures of the new leases. One of the things I would want to do is City Council just passed an ordinance that says no new leases. Well, you know what that begs the question of? What do you do with the oil leases that are on automatic renewal?
Exactly.
All right,
Exactly.
here's a plan. Here's a plan. You do a survey. You put it all on a chart, the way Ron Galpern does stuff in the controller's office, with an expiration date, with a notice date to give
Yeah.
notice to terminate. And then you implement the ordinance in that way, even as to renewals with respect to leases. So there's all kinds of environmental issues that come up, and the city attorney, to the extent that it is not a felony, so it's not a criminal felony, but all civil injunctions, all cease and desist orders represents the people of the state of California in criminal misdemeanor matters and can bring civil action in the name of the city of LA to stop pollution, to
Yeah.
stop bad
Environmental
behavior,
injustice.
and to really help remedy some of the environmental injustice that we've seen in our city.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that answer. And I see people in the chat really active saying great answers from the candidate. So, yes, thank you so much for answering that. You know, part of me bringing candidates to my chat, my live streams is, you know, number one, a lot of times, a lot of us feel that we don't have access to people in power. And everyone should have access to the people that we elect. So that's number one. And number two, I also try to humanize how hard it is to run for office and all of the things that we have to do and how the system sometimes is not even set up for women to run for office and nevertheless women of color. You know, so what are some of the challenges? Like one is like if you can maybe share an anecdote or maybe just tell us a story or maybe just in your own words, what are some of the challenging parts of running for office and walk us into like a very heartfelt or just like a very real issue that we have in our system about running for office for women. In your opinion, what is like a challenge?
I'll start with a bad one and then I'll start with a good one. And then I'll end with a good one. Okay. Like I used to say to my son, what do you want, the bad news or the good news? And he always said the bad news because that gives me something to look forward to. There's a lot of people pushing you to be something other than what you are. There's a lot of folks, and whether it's professional consultants or it's donors or it's people in the community saying to you, well, you need to look at the polling and you need to decide what you're going to say based on the polling and you need to, okay? I'm not running for that reason. I like to think I'm not quite as tactless as Popeye. Okay. I don't want to come to you and say, I am what I am because I'm not that inflexible. I do have the capacity as an intelligent human being to learn and to grow and to listen to somebody else's vicarious experience and adjust my perspective. But hanging on to your core and staying real to what you believe and being able to communicate what you believe clearly in 30 to 60-second sound bites when it's a very nuanced thing is incredibly difficult. And that's not to mention cold calling strangers asking for money. So there's parts of being a candidate that are unbelievably hard. And I'm really proud of the campaign that we've run so far. I mean, I
Yeah.
will tell you that there was in my race at least one other candidate who tried to start a cat fight between me and one of the other women candidates, and I refused to allow that to happen. I said, "No, no, no, no," and this person said to me, "Well, wouldn't it be good for you to be the only woman in the race?" And I sort of went, "Well, I'm not willing to commit murder to make that happen." So, I don't know what you're asking me. So that was hard. Now, the hopeful thing,
Yeah.
I had a meet and greet from a new friend in Studio City, which is not an area of the city that I knew well. And some folks showed up in the backyard, and I spoke. And understand, I'm just a person. I live in a duplex in the bottom apartment with my 92-year-old mother and my 7 to 8-year-old rescue pup Lucy, who's sitting here looking at me like, "Mom, what are you doing?" Um, and I spoke about our city and what I thought it needed and what I thought the city attorney could do. And afterwards, a woman walked up to me, and no one's ever said this to me before, and said, "I have to tell you, you've given me hope. I was ready
Mm,
to give
that's so
up on
sweet.
LA. I was ready to really start looking around to where I could go to. But if we can elect you and people like you, I'm willing to stay and be part of the solution. You've given me hope. And if I do nothing else in this race, if I can educate more of us about the importance of this office, and if I can bring people together and give hope, win, lose, or draw, we've all won."
Wow, that's amazing. And I know it's like those little moments or those moments when you're running for office that really keep you going and keep the fuel, in your heart and the passion. Because I don't know if this happened to you, but you get to a moment at a point where you cannot even, you're like, I don't even know if I can say one more time why I'm running. You start dreaming about it.
I don't know if you remember the first event that you held that I came to.
Uh-huh.
It was on Pico
In the
Boulevard,
vintage. Yeah.
okay, at a little vintage clothing store next
Yeah.
door to Power Plant, and there were maybe 10 of us in the room,
Yeah.
and you came in and you gave me hope. I mean, you had
Mm.
passion and energy and fresh perspective, and now that I've been a candidate, I understand you probably had given that speech at least 3 times that day, okay? But you
Everywhere, all
managed to
day.
keep it real.
Yeah,
Okay, and
yeah.
that's what I try to do. I don't ever have a script that I read from.
Mhm.
I do have talking points, but I I try to communicate in the moment and meet each audience member where they are, right? With what they need to hear.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. I am adding here in the for our viewers how they can get in touch with you. But what are some of the ways? What do you need in your campaign? How can people plug in? I see some folks in the chat very excited. So tell us how we can support you.
Number 1, please go to my website, sign up, volunteer. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Facebook. My
Yes.
handle on both is @electhydee, okay? And I try to post regularly. I'm not the person who actually does the posting, but I do approve the content. And please feel free to communicate with me there. I give out my cell phone. So I'm about to give all of your listeners my cell phone.
All
It is
right.
310-709-5504. I'll put it in the chat. It's right here. I carry it with me. Okay. Probably the one request I would have is please don't call me in the middle of the night. I go to bed early. And it's usually better if you try texting me to set up a time to talk just because I'm on the phone a lot. But that is my cell phone. I have lawn signs. I got lots of lawn signs. Please come take one. We're setting up phone banking and volunteer events throughout the month of May. You can sign up on the website. And this is going to sound crazy, but it's true. I've qualified for matching funds. I got
Mhm.
my first $205,000. There's $250,000 waiting for me at the city if I can raise money from LA residents.
Let's do it,
So
LA.
any donations from $5 to $214 are worth 6 to 1 to me. If you give me $25, guess what? That's $150 total.
Yes. It
So please,
multiplies. Let's
whatever
do
you
it,
can do
guys.
would be
Let's do it.
appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I see some other
Thank you,
folks
Aura.
posting in here. I want to congratulate you for running, wherever you end up and when you get elected, we're going to be there for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. It's so refreshing to meet a woman that is prepared, that is willing to serve, and that he also has the passion to do it. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here with us. All of the information is going to stay on the chat. Go ahead, everybody that is watching. Help us spread the word. Get Hydee to the finish line. Go ahead. I have her website, her phone number, all of it here. Thank you so much. And thank you, Hydee. And we'll see you next time very soon.
Thank you very much, Aura. Buenas noches a todos. Hasta pronto.
Gracias. Adios.
Adiós.
All right, friends. So that was another edition of Get to Know the Candidate with Hydee Feldstein. She is running for city attorney. And of course, the conversation always continues online and on the chat. So feel free to continue asking her questions and making your suggestions. Please go ahead and share this live stream with your friends and in your networks so that we can spread the word and together we can learn more and get more involved. Thank you, guys, and I'll talk to you very soon. Have a great night.